When people think about using neuro-linguistic programming in seduction or in dating in general, they usually think about Ross Jeffries mostly, or how to use some hypnotic scripts and techniques on text, on Tinder, on dating apps, or they may think about frame control, which is apparently what every famous actor like Brad Pitt, like Tom Cruise is using, but whenever you look for the specific techniques or how to learn that, it is pretty vague and not really concrete. From my experience though, there was only one skill that really made my skills skyrocket past the roof when it comes to interacting with women in general, and this was definitely sleight of mouth, which is the language side of frame control. How can you articulate an idea and reframe what the person just said without being aggressive, without trying to dominate, by making fun of yourself at the right time and fun of others at the right time too, always maintaining a good social image.
I'm not against having sex. I believe that the Lord put desire in your heart as a beacon for love. Well, it's the way that we can find someone and marry them and enjoy each other under his loving gaze.
When you mean that God watches married people have sex?
Well, God watches over everything.
So we're like porn for God.
In this video, you will learn why sleight of mouth is definitely an undervalued skill when it comes to dating and communication skills in general, and what are the main best patterns and phrases you can use to definitely improve your value in any woman's eyes. First of all, something to understand about females' psychology in modern society is that the image they have of seduction, of guys learning how to seduce, it is usually a very negative image because they associate that with the only guys who have the balls to approach them in general, who are mostly extremely arrogant, self-entitled narcissists, who think they are the most important thing on the face of the earth. And obviously that is not you, because if you are studying how to improve yourself, you're not an arrogant jerk, because otherwise you wouldn't presuppose there is anything to improve in yourself. But women usually get approached much more, or like in a work environment, they get confrontations much more with that type of guy. So they think seduction and using language or whatever is all about this, like those arrogant narcissists, which is not the case at all. But this is why they may put a very bad connotation on you whenever you approach them or whenever you use any kind of pickup line, whereas in the end you may just use that in a very light and fun way, and it can work really easily. This is a small clip from a movie I really like, which is unfortunately not in English, but I will translate with subtitles so you can understand. It is a great example, a humorous example of how you can turn the conversation to your advantage, kind of sounding like a dick in that example, but it can also be pretty funny to some extent.
Vous étiez belle cet après-midi, vous êtes très belle ce soir. J'attends demain avec impatience.
Inch'Allah, Lucien, je vous conduis.
Je n'ai jamais pu refuser quoi que ce soit d'une brune aux yeux marrons.
Et si j'étais blonde aux yeux bleus?
Cela ne changerait rien, vous êtes mon type de femme, Larmina.
Tiens donc. Et si j'étais naine et myope?
Eh bien, je ne vous laisserai pas conduire. Ça n'a pas de sens.
So on my side, I was not the shy kid for too long. At some point I was, but didn't really last too long. I was an artist, so I could approach people, but I was always staying stuck on the friends square. Like I was always the good friend, but I would stay the good friend forever and never really understand how can I pass a second gear and how can I make things move forward. I didn't really understand that. And at some point, this changed completely when I questioned, outlined from my thinking and questioned, why am I putting women of beauty, according to my standards, or even to society's standards, because back then I didn't really know about my actual taste in terms of what I like in a woman in general, but I was putting them on a pedestal usually, and I questioned that. And by digging into this book, Sleight of Mouth, I used all the exercises and all the phrases and the reframing to deframe, unframe, if we can say it like this, and reframe, therefore, my assumptions about why do I think they are above me, why do I think they are more important, because that was really my thinking back then. I thought because she's a beautiful girl, she's so important, and I just unveiled all those hidden assumptions and questioned, why am I thinking that way? Using sleight of mouth on my own beliefs really allowed me to just remove all those false expectations and false assumptions that they are more important, I figured out women usually are as lost as men are, if not more in many cases. And the point is that after I did that on myself, I started using those skills with Sleight of Mouth with female friends first. So I did not attack that right away on a girl I wanted to get into bed with. Sometimes yes, but in any case, in the beginning it was not working at all. So I was just trying to figure out what is the perspective, the perception of women about me or about men in general, asking them, what do you think about men in general, about how do men approach you, and about relationships in general, and about sexuality? And I noticed very interesting things from all the answers and challenging their assumptions in turn. First of all, I realized that for a pretty big chunk of them, a lot of women are so much more concerned about their own image or status among the terrible female competition, because they are so competitive with each other, like they are constantly judging each other on how they look, and among a group of friends they may be like really best sisters, but with another group of girls they might be like extremely negative and really judging each other, and among them it's a lot of pressure also. So many times when you think they think about you in a negative way, when they judge you, many times they don't even care about who you are. They care more about how they look among the social group they are part of, because among the social group there are other women and they want to stay on top, or like they assess how high they are, and they may get pretty low self-esteem if they realize that they are not that high. But so just to explain that many times they are much more stuck inside their own head than judging you. So it's not even about what should I say, it's about what does she think right now, because she may not even be aware of your intention. And whenever I was hearing some pretty negative assumption about men, like, oh, men should behave like this, men are like that, oh, men are never have the balls to blah, blah, blah. Whenever they had negative connotations about men in general, I was just using the magical combo I figured out down the road, which works like magic for me, the combo of chunking down plus chunking up. So I start with how specifically do you know that, and who specifically are you talking about? Because every time somebody says, oh, every man, or oh, all the women, it's always a generalization, and the first thing to do in that context is to chunk down to who specifically are you talking about, who is an example of that, and how do you know what you talk about is true. And if your reason is because my friends think the same, okay, but it is still like 5-6 people in total. It's not like every person on earth. Therefore, the next step for me was chunking up, and which is an exaggerated generalization on purpose, of course. So every man on earth is like that. So you are counting 3 billion men that you don't even know of. You may know like 100 of them, and you judge 3 billion people based on what 2 or 3 did in your entourage. That's what you're telling me right now. And by challenging it that way, I was always making them like mumble, like no, or like try to reassemble their assumption, their belief. But in the end, in most cases, they could not go on with their negativity and their false assumptions by using that combo, because it is just pointing out the lack of evidence in what they say. And one last thing before going on to the specific patterns you can use that I would really like to elaborate on is, please, despite all this social media mess right now, don't avoid misinterpreting a feminist with a toxic person. I know on social media there are all sorts of links that are not supposed to happen like this, and they take shorts out of context, many things like that. But basically, the whole thing about, oh, feminists, they are aggressive, they want to take power over men. Every time I talked with a feminist face to face, I never had a problem. Out of 15, 20, I would say maybe I meet 1 or 2 that are highly, highly toxic people, and who indeed will not let anyone speak. They always know everything better than anyone else. But I met like maybe 1 or 2 of them out of 20. And in the end, my response was just to leave and go talk to the girls who were much more open-minded and interesting to talk to. So those women you may associate with the feminist movement, which is not about dragging men down or anything like that, it is more complicated. If you think they are all like that, basically you are associating a mental predator, a toxic person who is therefore a psychological predator, with philosophical and social movement. The same way some women are highly misogynistic and say, oh, all men are like this, all men are bad because they saw just one guy criticizing women or having extremely misogynistic views on YouTube or whatever, and now they generalize, oh, men today, they're not what they used to be like before, whatever. It is the same thing, okay? They are taking one predator or one extremely toxic personality and assuming that every man on earth is the same way, which is not the case at all. But therefore, if you are among those who make that confusion of a feminist and a toxic person, just realize that predators, any kind of toxic person, man, woman, whatever gender you want to call that, any predator is just trying to get a victim, basically. And if they keep targeting you as their victim, as their assumed victim, it means that somehow they have been smelling your fear. So you don't deal with that by using sleight of mouth, because with those people, both men and women, the response, the answer is to just leave and never see them again. That is the best thing you can ever do. However, if you keep attracting them in your life, it means something in you has been appealing. Some fear in you hasn't been handled, and in this way we talk more about healing, getting deeper on what is the source of your fear, what are you scared of, and by healing that through hypnosis or whatever you want to do, you can dissociate yourself from all that negativity that tends to target young men who are not really assertive yet. So now coming onto the actual patterns and things you can say. Basically, many men are scared of saying this, saying that, what if she doesn't like this when I talk about this? In the end, you know what? As long as you're not promoting any sort of psychological or physical violence over women, as long as you stay away from that, pretty much anything you say can go by when and only when it is congruent in all the aspects of your life, of your personality, and of your behavior. So if you say, oh yeah, me when I am with a woman in a relationship, I never look at other girls, impossible. And 5 minutes later, the waitress comes by and you just check her ass. That's completely incongruent. You're just ruining your image and what you want to project in that instant because you're not being congruent. But when all the things you say are completely congruent with your behavior, with your eye contact, with everything you say about yourself and about your life, then it goes by much more often than you would think. Many times I can say outrageous things to women about sexual adventures I've had in the past, and I talk about that brutally. But since I don't have any problem with being open sexually, it goes by. Because I'm open about it and I'm not having any shame or any fear about, am I going to be judged? I don't care. And if she doesn't like that, she can leave or I will leave anyway. But I don't care. That is the point. And therefore, when you are completely aligned and you're confident in yourself that it is your right to talk about what you want to talk about, then it's okay. And my point here is that frame control in general will work when it is coming more from a light and fun vibe. You're having fun with yourself, about yourself, and with others, rather than, I want to dominate, I'm a tough alpha male. If you come from this vibe, obviously you will be turned into an idiot by their comments, by very mean comments from women around you, because they could sense your vulnerability that made you try to be this tough guy. If you act like this tough alpha male, obviously you will be put down in the conversation one way or another. But if you don't really care about what people think of you, then everything you say will work more easily and will tend to make people laugh much more easily too. The least you take yourself seriously, the better it works. For example, I think it was 1 year ago, I was with a group of girls and guys in a bar and I ordered a drink which is called a Monaco, which is a pink drink, really sweet, and because I like that. And one girl said, it's a girl's drink, really trying to make fun of me. And what I replied intuitively was, oh, but I am really in touch with my feminine side. Do you have a problem with that? And that is another magical combo I found out through exploring and experimentation. It is whenever there is any kind of negative comment or any kind of shit test about you, making fun of yourself plus asking a question about her, it is completely cancelling the negativity, the aggressiveness sometimes, because some of them may be aggressive if they have had a bad day or whatever. And at this moment, everyone laughed at the table. And then she was the one that people were targeting with misogynistic views, not me in any sort of way. Whereas many things I say could appear misogynistic because of my open views on sexuality. But in that context, in that social environment, I just redirected all the negative vibe and energy toward her without being aggressive. That's the whole point, by making fun of me and of her somehow without being aggressive, and that's how I technically owned the frame at the table. So now for the actual patterns, I will name 5 that I think are much more relevant and important than the other ones, and you can use them on the fly, maybe mix them together the way I did with the chunk down and chunk up, but I will give you the ones that work the most from my experience within that context, dating, seduction, flirting, all of those things. The first one, which was the one being used in the 2 examples we saw from movies and comedy earlier in that video, it is the consequence pattern. Anything where you talk about what is going to happen in the future between you and her. Generally, it is just about the future, any sort of context mixed together, but here in a flirting and dating context, it will be about mostly you and her together. One example is if she says, I have a boyfriend, and I'm using that one all the time, what I reply instinctively is, oh, don't worry, I am not jealous. And I kind of turn around it in a funny way, but the presupposition behind, oh, I'm not jealous, is you and I will end up together anyway. But I'm not saying that in an aggressive way or like in a misogynistic way. I'm just saying that as a fun way, like presupposing I will end up with you anyway, and if it doesn't work in the end, I don't care. It is just about the point of being fun and playful. Another one I had recently, in a party somewhere, I was talking with the female friend of a guy I had seen on stage. It was like a comedy show, and she was asking me about my project, and I said I was practicing music right now. I said in the beginning, like 10 years ago, I practiced some guitar when I was a teenager, but didn't really go that far. And right away, she put me in a box saying, oh yeah, you tried to play the guitar to pick up girls, right? And right away I said, yeah, but it failed miserably. And she laughed, because I was not taking myself seriously. And also because it is actually the truth. When I did that when I was 17 years old, I did not pick up any girl with my guitar. Far from that. Next we have the redefine pattern, which I guess might be the one you can use to explain most of those examples you see online about how to pass a shit test, how to pass through a shit test, or how to use a frame control in a dating scenario, in a social context. I guess the redefine is many times the one you could study to figure out how they do that linguistically speaking. Redefine might be, for example, any phrase where what she says, she asks anything about you, and you say, whoa, slow down lady, I'm not an easy boy. Which normally is the reverse. It is the girl who's supposed to say, I'm not an easy girl, but saying that first presupposes, or you're redefining that her behavior was an attempt to pick you up, which could also be an intention pattern we're going to see later. But for now, let's say on the redefine, you are taking one thing she says or does and you redefine it into something else. You call one thing another thing. That's a basic way of explaining that. For example, this one, if she says, I have a boyfriend, what I may say is, oh, don't worry, no one is perfect, I understand. Which is the presupposition that I am redefining what she's just said as a complaint. Oh, I have a boyfriend. Whereas probably she said that in a positive way and like in a defensive way. No, I have a boyfriend, and I am redefining that into, oh, I'm so sorry for you. Is it okay? So basically the light and fun way of using that many guys use it in the pickup artist community, at least the ones who can use it properly, is to redefine everything she says or does as if she was a salesperson trying to sell you something or trying to sell you a relationship or a one-night stand with you. Next we have the model of the world pattern, which is, I would say, the one I used the most in the beginning, not even from a seduction standpoint, oh, I'm trying to get her. It was just from an exploration standpoint. I was really aiming at understanding, discovering what the female mind is made of, what is the difference between them and men, and what are the similarities, but in a different way. So many times when men think women don't struggle with relationships and sex, they do. When women think men don't struggle with those things, they do actually. And everyone thinks that it is easier for the other side, but not really. When you really take the time to investigate and explore how they think of themselves and what happens in their intimate and love life, you rapidly discover that it is not really easier for them. They may not have the problems you have as a guy, but they have other problems you don't have. So in the end, no one is perfect. Everyone has to learn things. So I like to explore through many questions what she thinks about the world, what she thinks about her life, about herself. And the more I make her talk about herself, the more she feels comfortable around me, around my presence, because she feels like she can open herself. Instead of just me trying to get something out of her, now she feels like, okay, we can exchange together. It is a nice encounter. And another thing, curiously, I discovered about all those experimentations is when a woman gets approached by a guy who is trying to pick her up in a bad way or in a kind of really too intrusive way, she says later to her friends, oh, somebody tried to pick me up. But when she meets a guy who can communicate in a nice way, who can make her think about herself into unconventional ways, and who can have a nice conversation with her, she won't say somebody tried to pick me up. She will say, most likely, I met somebody. Which is already fine in itself. It's not somebody tried to pick me up, whereas maybe it was the case, probably it was the case actually, but it is, oh, I met somebody. He's so interesting. And one funny way I could use that, mixing with the redefined somehow pattern, is if she says like, oh, a real man should behave that way, or like a real man should open the door, a real man should do this or that, whatever box she's trying to put you into. And my presupposition behind that is, okay, if she has a negative connotation about what men are not doing enough of, I presuppose she had a bad encounter or a bad situation happening with a man in her past, which is pretty much the case with every woman past the 20 years old or close to, in this kind of joking way, like she's talking about even some past trauma. Somebody tried to hurt you, what happened? And again, it is kind of cancelling the potential negativity there might be around this, around, oh man, today they are like this, they are like that, and bringing that down to who hurt you. It is obviously not something to say in a very serious way. It is something to say in a joking, playful manner. But the point is, first of all, you are chunking down. Like I said before, every time they or you make a generalization about every woman, every man, you are wrong and they are wrong anyway. So the point is to chunk down to a specific, very specific person that you have in mind when you think about that, and letting her understand that you are not, and there is no reason you should be, like the man, the guy she thinks about, or the group of guys she thinks about. Number 4 is the intention pattern, which is tricky because it may appeal to your intention or to her intention. Basically, many women, especially when they had really bad experiences with guys in the past, they may try to put you in a box right away, whether you fit in or not. So actually they could be right to some extent, because many guys are just dumb and try to pick them up without any kind of skills, without any kind of charm, of charisma. So in that case, I can understand they may generalize a little bit to some guys that I have seen approaching who are really doing a terrible job at this, but also a lot of them are trying to improve themselves and to learn how to communicate better. And for those, I disagree with the statement that every man is like that. So if she's trying to put me in a box, I'm going to reframe that immediately by clarifying my intention, and also being sometimes brutally honest. Like, do you try to get sex with me? I'm going to say, yeah, of course, why not? Do you think you don't deserve it? And from there, she's going to try to justify herself, or it might be such a shocking comment that at least it will create a pattern interrupt and make her get out of her basic negativity. And in the end, if she remains negative after that, despite me being playful, the next thing I'm going to do is leave and go to somebody else. Or it may be about her intention. Therefore, if she says like, if I mention like open relationships, which is something I'm talking about all the time usually, all the time basically, if she says, oh, I would never do that, oh, women would never do that, they are sluts with the ones who do that. Okay, so now I want to clarify the intention, what happened before in her past, exploring her world again from a respectful standpoint, exploring what happened in her past that made her think that way. So one basic question I could ask is, did you ever try it at least? Do you even know somebody who tried it? How do you know it is so bad? Women who enjoy that are sluts. Who? Who do you know specifically? Chunking down again. From there, I can elaborate on, okay, you have a very negative perception of what I'm talking about, but what I actually do talk about is not the people you know of. You may know 2 or 3 people who were extremely negative or narcissist or whatever, who may look like the representation you have of what I'm talking about, but it is not the case. What I'm talking about is something different. Please let me elaborate. From there, we start from a nice standpoint of my world and my life is something you don't know yet. Let me show you what it is before you make a judgment on me, because I don't judge you for what I see right now yet, or I may judge your physique, but I won't use that only to judge you as a person. Therefore, I will want to learn about you. You can do the same with me. You can learn to know who I am before judging me. And from there, we can have a nice encounter and end up as friends in the in the worst case scenario, and more than friends in the best case scenario. And the last one is chunking up, so exaggerating basically what she said in a humorous way to lighten things up. For example, if we stay on the same idea, like no woman who respects herself would ever do that, either if it is polyamory, multiple relationships, or certain sexual practices, and like she might get defensive, like, oh, no woman who is a high standard woman would ever want to do that or whatever. Whenever she makes a generalization like this, I may chunk up to, oh, so you have met 3 billion people on Earth. Because you said no woman. So it presupposes you have met every woman on Earth, basically. Around 3 billion, even 3 billion point 8 or something. Which is the case, basically. That is what you're telling me right now. No? Okay, I misunderstood. So can you clarify for me, please, who are the people you talk about when you say no woman would ever do that? Who? Who do you know who would not do that? 4, 5, 6, or your group of friends? Okay, fine. Your group of friends is like 12 people at most. Okay, maybe 40 people at most. Out of those 40 girls you know, none of them would enjoy that. I can understand this. Now, you presuppose that because you know those 40 or like 12 girls around you who don't enjoy what I'm talking about, no other woman on Earth that you don't know could even enjoy that either? Like, that is your opinion? And obviously they say, no, but it's not like that, but it's just that, and they will just get emotional sometimes. But what I really found out over the years is you get the highly emotional and narcissist women when they are really young. The more I grew in age, the more maturity I noticed in the women I was exchanging with, at least the ones who were my age, evolving at the same time. I noticed much more maturity in the conversations than when I was 19, 20 years old, where they basically knew everything. They had seen 2 or 3 Hollywood movies about how romance is supposed to happen, and that was their main interpretation for how men should behave. And when they get past 25, 27 years old, they realize that it does not happen like in the movies, and they kind of change their expectations and what they think of men. Then obviously many women unfortunately have had bad experiences with some extremely narcissistic men in the past. But my point is always, I am different than what you expect. So let me clarify how I am, and then if you want, you can judge me. But not before I have at least shown you that what you expect of me is not at all who I am. Ultimately, when we talk about frame control or using sleight of mouth, what keeps coming back, in the literature or in those ebooks or in those videos is, the meta frame, which is the interpretation you have for the conversation at hand. So if everything she says you reinterpret it as she's trying to get you, then it will make the conversation escalate more easily towards something sexual or things like that. And I did not on purpose include this meta frame pattern into those 5 I enumerated here, because to me the meta frame is more about developing your life. Today, do I still get shit testing, or do I still get women trying to drag me down or anything? Barely 1% or like 0.5% of the women I'm talking to at this point try to drag me down or have any kind of negative behavior around me or toward me. The reason for that is I have built on my skills, my communication skills, up to the point where it is my actual way of living. I live from my skills in communication and my understanding of psychology. It's really a professional career I decided to take on, and I developed a high level of skills in those things. Therefore, when I talk about something I know, it's very tough. You can argue with me on things I know, and even if you were trying to, you would not stand like 20 seconds. Because I just know way too much for you to try to reframe something that is not true about my topics. So when you have a high level of expertise in something, whatever it is, and you talk about your passion in life, the things you do in life, then you will be a high value thing, or like a reframing. You will be the reframing yourself as a personality. You will be a reframer, if we can put it that way, as a personality. And a lot of the conversations I have turn into a playful therapy session. Not actually trying to do therapy, but like if she complains about something, or if she says that she's lost about something in her life, one joke I would always use is, oh, do you want to talk about it? My office is open at 5 p.m. on Monday. Come to me, we will handle that. And since I have talked about before about my job, what I do for a living, it always makes people laugh because they know it's actually for real. I actually do therapy for a living. So it is not something I pull out of my hat just to try to make people laugh. It is something that is actually true about me and myself, and that I can demonstrate very easily. If anyone asks me about anything about how their mind works or how my mind works or whatever, I can demonstrate my skills really easily. So when you can demonstrate value in your knowledge, that is something that you don't really need money for. You don't need extremely beautiful looks for. Of course, it does help to have money and looks, it does help for sure, but you can still get results even without that or without much of those. I hope you have enjoyed. If you want to learn a bit more about that, there is a document in the description called the 7 Steps to Master Sleight of Mouth, and you can learn how to alter your language based on the response the person is giving you, not only in a flirting and dating context, but in any sort of context of life. You can download that right away, and I hope to see you soon in the next video.